Yeah, I see you on there too, because they're pretty busy. Yeah.
All right,
Here, that's it somewhere.
all right, everyone, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I am Sarah, I'm the club secretary, and I'll be running the show tonight. Until Barb comes back. So thank you again for coming out to our May cultivation meeting. Huge thank you to Espo Wilcox for all of the spawn, and also a really cool presentation at the end of this meeting. And huge thank you to our hospitality chairs for bringing out lemonade. It was pink lemonade and regular lemonade. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So these are our club officers. In October, we always have a re-election. So here is who is running the club so far. So Barbara is our president. Julie Travellini, who is also not here tonight, is our vice president. I am the secretary. Mike Henry is our treasurer, and Kara Coulter is our NAMA trustee. And is Mike or Kara in the room? Okay. All right. So with being a member comes our monthly meetings. So the club usually meets monthly from March to November, every third Tuesday from 7 to roughly 9 p.m. at Frick Park Environmental Center. And usually there are guest lecturers present at each meeting, so we're always doing something fun. Of course, technology just decided not to work. There we go. So these are upcoming meetings. Last month, we had a fascinating truffle lecture by Maria Rogers on the truffle fungi diversity of the Midwest. Today, we have Espo Wilcox, who's going to do a presentation on mushroom cultivation. Next month, June 16th, we'll have a presentation on bicolor boletes by Colin Domnauer. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing these correctly. On July 21st, we have Carrie Macabre, who is presenting on Lactarius and Lactophyllus genera. And then August 18th, Michael Wilson will be presenting on Amanita muscaria. September 15th, Maria Pinto will be discussing a survey of Black mycologists. October 20th, that would be me. I will be running the photo contest and also the costume contest on October 20th. You can already start submitting photos if you really like. November is our annual meeting. It's a bit of a potluck, so bring a covered dish to that meeting. And then we have some upcoming walks and events. Now, if you're an identifier, if you have an idea for a walk, please reach out to Josh Morris, our Mushroom Club walk chair, at jmorris@wpamushroomclub.org. So some of our upcoming walks include on May 23rd, we are going to have a walk out at Wolf Creek Narrows with Josh Morris. And then on May 28th, we have the Lesbians Walk at the Hayes Woods with John Plischke and Becca Marsh. And then on June 6th, we have a walk at Dead Man's Hollow. It's the big mushroom hike. I am leading that one. That is an ALT walk, so registration is required, and there is a small $5 fee with that one. On June 11th, we have the Montour Woods with Hollow Oak Land Trust, led by Mike Henry. Registration is also required for that one. And on June 20th, we have the Oil Creek State Park Walk with Beth Ace and Ron Hilton. So keep your eye on our events calendar. We always have a couple walks per month. And they're always a blast. All right, coming up, we have Mushroom Education Day on June 13th at Powder Mill Nature Reserve. That is our schedule. We have a fantastic lineup of presenters. We have an intro into fungi and the relationship with birds presented by Stephen Buckland. And then we have edible mushrooms and their lookalikes presented by Barbara. And then lunch is on your own. And then we have, after lunch, better fungal photography for iNaturalists led by Don Wayman. And then we have our walks and ID table using the local trails and back picnic area at the nature reserve. All right, so that's always a fun event. Powder Mill has fun mushrooms, really fantastic species. And then there is a camping retreat on July 10th through the 12th. Laurel Hill State Park. You can join John Plischke, our WPMC mycologist, for a weekend of commodity, mushroom walks, and collecting specimens for DNA. It is $20 per tent, which is not refundable. And there is no need to register if you are attending just for the day. Club activities. So let's see. So a few of our updates. So we do have a brand new YouTube channel, which our meetings are recorded and will be posted to at this new channel. Check it out if you aren't able to, if you have to miss a meeting. We also have a brand new iNaturalist project. The new one is called WPMC Western Pennsylvania Fungi. Currently we only have 59 members, so go ahead and join. But once you join the project, that's it. That is a collection project. So once you are a member and you upload your observations and they match the project criteria, they will automatically be added. Previously, with our old project, you would have to manually add each individual observation to the project. With this new project, you do not have to do that step anymore. And then each year, we always host a big foray, our 2026 annual link-off foray. Our co-chairs include myself, Katie Mannion, and Don Wayman. Stephen Buckland will be handling a logo contest, more to come on that. Cicely Franklin handles our auction, and Mike Henry is our foray feast chair with co-chairs Scott Pavel and Mary Lou Lenhart. So the food is legendary, so I recommend checking out this event. And it is on October 10th is the day of the foray, but we always have a couple walks leading up to it. For example, the Cook's Forest walk. We always do a UV walk on October 8th at Clarion County. So join identifiers for an evening through the Forest Cathedral. They will be using some UV flashlights to light up the trail and search for fungi that will glow under the UV lighting. And as far as terrain goes, expect to walk about 1 to 2 miles, and the steepness is roughly, it's at steep grades of 10 to 17%. But you are able to shorten your distance as needed on this little journey. I've been to one of these walks, and I have to say it is really, really cool. You always learn something new and always learn, make new discoveries. And then our big Cook's Forest walk on October 9th. This one is usually at Shelter 2, but it's our pre-foray walk at Cook's Forest State Park. There is no charge. You can just show up. But you will be responsible for your own transportation and your own lunch. So bring your own lunch. And then the big event is on October 10th at the North Park Lodge. There's quite a bit of a distance between Cook's Forest and North Park. But This consists of guided morning walks in the morning. We have some afternoon speakers lined up. Mushroom display tables, auction and sales. We always have our legendary mushroom feast. We're always looking for folks that may help make the feast happen. The feast is a result of volunteers bringing dishes to the feast. More information on that. And then we have our table walk. So registration costs for the Link Off Foray on October 10th. So if you are a member, a current member in good standing, it's $50 until September 15th, and afterwards it goes up about $10. Non-members about $75, and student and kids ages 11 through 18, roughly $30, and prices rise after September 15th. And you can register by going to our website there. So our foray feast. Mike Henry, Scott Pavel, and Mary Lou Linhart are our chairs for the feast. If you're going to volunteer a dish for the feast, we ask that you cook for roughly 10 to 15 people. You don't have to cook for the whole 100 that usually show up, just enough for 10 to 15 people. Wild mushrooms, if they're being used in your dish, it must be approved by an identifier through the club. Store-bought mushrooms are perfectly fine, or you're welcome to skip them entirely. We're always happy to have food. Food is food. So, and you're welcome to consider bringing non-mushroom options, especially for folks who may have allergies. We always welcome vegan and gluten-free options too. And if you want to bring or dish or help with the feast in any way, please reach out to Mike Henry at foray-feast at WPAmushroomclub.org. All right. Now, at our Link Off Forays, we always have really snazzy t-shirts that go along with it. And for a couple years now, we have been doing a logo contest where you all, the members, help us design the next t-shirt. So we're calling all artists. This is the third logo contest. We have more about the rules, deadlines, and prizes up on our May, June newsletter. And Stephen Buckland will be running that. And so send your submissions to sbuckland at WPAmushroomclub.org. Submissions must be family friendly. And no AI generated art. It can be digital, but classic art and some digital art is A-okay. All right, so memberships. You can renew your memberships online or with Dawn. Your membership dues contribute to over 40% of WPMC's yearly income. So you make all of these events and all of the cool things that we do possible. And it's vital to keep the club running. So visit our website to renew your membership if you have not already. All right, so this is our current member standing. At the end of the year last year, we had roughly 652 members and 398 households. As of right now, we have 453 members and 276 households. That is expected to spike a little bit the closer we get to the foray. All right, some benefits to joining the club. You get to come to 9 monthly meetings with educational presentations from guest speakers and even workshops. You get a free grow kit during our May cultivation meeting, so just like today. You can participate in our ID Button Awards program to showcase your mushroom knowledge. Julie Travaglini runs the Button ID program. And now they go up into the thousands if you've been able to identify that many mushrooms. You get 5 newsletters to showcase what the club has been up to. You get to participate in our annual photo contest to show off your mushroom photography and also have a chance to win some pretty cool prizes. And then you get to be a part of our private Facebook group as well. And be able to see what other folks are finding and even post to the group. sticking again. One moment. It is giving me a hard time.
Okay, hold on.
Thank you. And so our next upcoming meeting in June is by Colin. It's what's in a name? Uncovering the hidden diversity within the bicolor boletes. So he's going to discuss more about boletes. They are notoriously diverse and very difficult to identify. So if you want to learn more about boletes, attend his lecture next month. And do we know if this one's in person or if it's virtual?
I think it's virtual.
Is it virtual?
I think so.
Okay. So yes, some of our meetings are, some of our speakers attend in person or they can be virtual. And I think this one might be
We have the meeting here.
Yes, we have the meeting
We
here.
can also be off-site and watch the meeting.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, we can be off-site and watch the meeting and
Like Cecily is right now.
Yeah, I think, does Colin live in Colorado?
Pardon?
Does Colin live in Colorado?
I
think he's
don't
far away.
remember.
all right, any questions?
Yeah, I am new, so I just wanted to know, all of the information that you showed, I can find at the Mushroom Club, Western Pennsylvania Mushroom Club.
So all of the, if you're talking about the slides, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel. And we have a website where you can find all of the information on our blocks and events on our website.
So how do I get your website on YouTube?
It is, I think it's just is it Western Mushroom Club?
WPAmushroomclub.org.
WPAmushroomclub.org.
I have an announcement. I was told that there are still plenty of blogs and oyster mushroom kits out there. And if you would like to go
Whole
grab a
bunch
second
of
one,
them.
do it sooner rather than later.
Okay.
If you're starting to pack up. General announcement.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions before we switch over to our cultivation lecture? All right.
Control L. Thanks, Sarah. We're gonna turn things over to Espo. Yeah. You folks need. You need a minute to go to the bathroom, or are you ready to roll? Let's take a minute break. Use the bathroom. Go grab your other grow kit if you want. We'll get started with Espo here in a minute.
Yeah. He texted me and he texted me and said, you know, Rich, you're gonna be here. And I was like, I didn't think to ask him where he was gonna be, but.
Oh, he's up, he went up to low. But Richard's making biscotti. So I wanted to ask you, was it okay if we bring biscotti of his to sell up at your store?
Yeah, we sell it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Really well.
I think it was.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
100%.
I'll bring you samples of everything.
Yeah, we'll post it.
Okay,
That'd be
perfect.
great.
Okay. I like the girls.
Yeah, they're so silly. They make me do all this stuff. They're
I
great
know.
though. It's great. People love it.
Yeah, they
People come
do.
in. It's crazy the amount
Yeah.
of feedback we get.
Yeah, they're very cute. They went to the prom.
Yeah,
It's very
yeah,
cute.
yeah. So they're like a part of the community. Everybody
I
loves it.
know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put my log
All
away.
right. Well,
But, all right, hey, it was great to see you.
Good
Come,
to see you
Kristen,
too.
we'll come try and come see you.
Yeah.
I'll
be
bring
up
you
there.
biscotti and,
Yeah.
okay.
I'll be there.
Saturday,
Yeah,
day?
I'll be
Yeah,
there.
okay, perfect. Thank you. Esther.
That way it doesn't.
Check 1 2 1 2. All right, started.
Yeah.
Give you some background. Been listening to this really cool band called Mother Soki. Really cool. You guys should check it out. Anyways, yeah. Yeah, we'll talk about mushrooms.
Mother Sophie. It's really cool.
You started your company in 2021?
Yes,
Okay.
it's been over 5 years now.
How much were you doing before that? How long were you?
Oh, ooh, that's a great question. I thought about that the other day, but I didn't want to like age myself too much. So I didn't want, I was like, the bigger the number, people are gonna be like, oh, yeah. But I started like in agriculture. I was raised in agriculture, so but like actually when I was doing like getting paid probably at least 15 to 20 years prior.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm originally from Darby Beach, Florida. I was raised on a landscaping nursery. So, you know, but we're in the subtropics, and my family also has a farm in Jamaica
Okay.
that we do a lot of agricultural, you know. more-
So you were doing it in Jamaica also?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Are they significantly different mushrooms?
significantly different? But you know, that dry climate, they do have, interesting enough, they do have some psilocybe species there naturally occurring in that belt with Florida. The subtropics, very hot.
Okay.
Species that loves that.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't get all the northern cold stuff.
Right. So you get a lot of warm weather stuff, a lot of boletes. The forest is completely different in Florida compared to here in Pennsylvania, where it's so temperate and you have all these microclimates everywhere where you can follow these pockets of different things and all the different tree associations. So Florida is just interesting, and Jamaica is very interesting, but I like because of the microclimates as well. And the different trees, mahogany, and all these different things they have on the island that makes it
Okay.
interesting for different fungi. But
Well,
Sure.
and that's gotta be a
This
completely
one is
different
Allegheny
climate than
Land
Florida
Trust, so I think.
because
yeah,
you're so much further south.
yeah.
Got some stupid island called Cuba.
Yeah, right, yeah. But yeah, so it's been back like that far for me. And then doing a lot more horticulture and grafting, plants and trees and
I think a lot of them
bougainvillea,
you don't have to be a member.
stuff with like, you know, growing
Except for
coconut
the-
palms from
Oh, you don't
seed,
have to be a member for anything.
stuff like that. So
Sometimes it's just.
like more tropical species, fruit, a lot of citrus, mango, passion fruit.
Yeah,
A lot of trees. You
stuff
know,
we don't have here at all. Yeah.
You know, I'm gonna
Mango.
Pennsylvania, like apples. You know.
Bananas would grow like wild.
Yeah.
Okay.
Powder Mill Nature Reserve, Rector, PA.
I was gonna do it within like the next 2 days. I'll stick this in the refrigerator. I'm gonna spawn. Yeah.
All right, we'll be resuming shortly. Folks could start to make their way
I
back.
didn't get a chance to look in them. I hadn't gotten. I'm like, oh, that's what it is. All right, yeah. You can refrigerate the spawn.
Yeah.
How long is it going to process these?
Yeah, someone just
Do
brought
it
it.
within 2 days. Or
Yeah.
put it in the
Do
Do you want to wait?
There's the plastics today. Yes.
Yeah.
Especially for the mushroom Right? So, yeah, they do have. Microplastics.
the same waiting is part of the
Yeah.
I think we will get things rolling here with Espo's talk. So yeah, I'm gonna pass it over to Espo.
All right, thank you and welcome. Appreciate everyone showing up to the annual Cultivation Day, really big meetings. I like this. I think this is kind of like the first family reunion gathering for the club. It's like a larger meeting. A lot of people come from all over, especially for the logs. A lot of great representation on that. And it's like the benchmark. I feel like the midway point between this and the Linkoff, you know, for me at least. But really excited to be here and presenting today. So my name's Espo Wilcox. I go by Espo in the field. My background is in agriculture. I just had a conversation before we started about like how in it, and I was like,
if I give too big of a number, it kind of ages me, so short 5 years, but at least upwards of 15 years. I was raised in Delray Beach, Florida on a landscaping nursery. My family also has a farm in Jamaica. We do a lot of agricultural crops, plantains, bananas, yam, grapefruit, avocado, breadfruit, a bunch of different citrus varieties, but it's in the subtropics. But I migrated here in 2017 from Telluride, Colorado, and got an opportunity in broadcasting, and moved here, complete new habitat, flora, fauna, fish out of water. Didn't know, anything or how to navigate, but I was fascinated by the beauty of the area. So fast forward, started hiking, learning how to identify the different trees. Along with that came the mushrooms. I befriended this gentleman, and he would go out and bring back wild mushrooms. Together we break out books and learn how to identify them. But initially, we were the only two that were brave enough to eat them within our families, right? We go out, harvest these wild mushrooms, bring them back to eat, and everyone's like, "Oh, are you sure? You guys know what you're doing over there?" But yeah, so everyone's a little reluctant, but I kind of relied on my background, and then sought out education and mushroom identification and the ability to sell wild mushrooms within Pennsylvania. From there, after many mushroom seasons and lots of foraging, I just had this bug and I didn't want it to stop. I was like, oh, is there any way I can continue doing this? Is there any way that I could do this full time for a living? And it sounded far-fetched to a lot of people. I remember being at dinner with my family and I'm like, hey, I want to do this full time. And they're like, mushrooms? Like, are you on them? Yeah, maybe. But, yeah, so, but, I followed through again, having that strong, I think, background in agriculture and just waking up early every day and getting after it, being in the sun 12 hours a day, and just the ability to want to do that, be outside, touch grass all day, just motivated me a lot more than being on the radio, broadcasting. It was fun doing sales, being in touch with the community and being that voice of reason. Was great, to be on that beacon, but I wanted to be outside. So in 21, I launched the PA Mushroom Company. Initially, I would sell wild mushrooms. That was how I was trained, and that is primarily what I did. Fast forward from there, many farmers markets, and starting to do mushroom cultivation, launching the company. And a few years in, I found this, what was restaurant or bar for sale. And I was like, well, man, maybe this is my opportunity. I'm not really like a bartender, but I can cook some food and figure it out. Anyways, purchased this building, put up a building behind it for the cultivation. And here we are today. So now we have a restaurant, we have a mushroom farm, we have a lot of educational programming in reference to wild mushroom purveying and also mushroom cultivation, which we'll touch on and talk about today. So first question, has anyone here grown mushrooms before or tried to? Okay, all right, okay. Oh, and before we move forward, with your mushroom kits, there is a bag of spawn in there. It looks like rye seed. If you're not going to use that within the next 3 days, or attempt to make a kit within the next 3 days, store that in the refrigerator. All right, you probably got upwards of a month on that, so that'll keep it fresh. And before you bring it out, let it come to room temp before you use it to inoculate your grow kits. Any questions so far? I like to stop slide to slide so you don't have to hold that burning desired question until the end and then forget what you wanted to ask, because I know how that feels. All right, mushroom cultivation 101. I like to start with what I call the money shot. All of the mushrooms, or at least a few of the different mushroom varieties that are rather easy to grow. However, they all have different parameters and different substrates and different metrics for growth. But I've grown all of these varieties and many more. All of these mushrooms have wild origin stories, which we'll touch on as we move forward. And out of all of these, it's really hard to pick a favorite. I know
Lion's mane is really popular for its medicinal properties, as well as like reishi, the native species that can be easily identified is going to be Ganoderma sugae, which grows on hemlock, which is the state tree, which is probably one of the reasons I kind of lean towards that mushroom. However, I wouldn't recommend it as a choice edible. You can't eat it in its early growth phases. But yeah, all of these mushrooms are special, and you can grow all of these mushrooms as well, but it takes time. And I recommend starting with one. You have the oyster mushroom, which is very beginner friendly, resists contamination, which is things and some of the subject matter we'll touch on as we move forward. All right, so what are mushrooms? I'd like to start with just a general question. Anyone out there have an answer? Potential answer? No wrong answers. Come on.
It's the fruiting body of mycelium.
Right, perfect. The fruiting body of mycelium. Now, on the broad spectrum, you have fungi. So all mushrooms are fungi, but not all fungi are mushrooms, right? Because fungi, you're talking smuts, molds, rust, and yeast as well in that category. But yes, the mushroom is the fruiting body or the reproductive system of the organism. Mushrooms start their life as genetic material known as spores. Spores germinate into thread-like filament known as mycelium. That mycelium will go on to produce something known as a primordia. The primordia gives life to the mushroom fruit body, and the fruit body is sole purpose is to reproduce. So release those spores, continue the life cycle, and it continues so on and so forth. So the mycelium is kind of like the cardiovascular system of the organism, and the spore is going to be your genetic material or marker. So similar to plants, right, with seed germination, however, much different, right? Because plants are autotrophs, which means of their own energy. Mushrooms are heterotrophs, meaning of other energy, as we are, right? So we eat other things and consume them to produce energy. Mushrooms do that at an intercellular level by excreting compounds into their substrate, breaking that substrate down, then absorbing those compounds through the mycelium network and passing that forward to the fruit body for production. So a little biology lesson on the organism as a whole. Yes.
So like a spore from one mushroom, do they reproduce with, do they ever combine DNA with like another spore, or it's just basically a clone type of thing?
Well, like so a mushroom can produce like hundreds of thousands of spores. And in cultivation, you can actually get something known as spore lung from just spore inhalation due to the large volume they can produce at mass. But a spore is going to be a different genetic lineage in comparison to a clone, which would be something you would derive from a tissue culture, which we'll talk about. But yeah, spore is going to be a new genetic lineage of the same mushroom species. So it can have different features. For instance, with oyster mushrooms, if you get a spore print, you now have thousands of potential new species within that spore print. So you have to germinate those spores, look for characteristics like fast mycelial growth, take a section from that growth and transfer it to a new plate, grow it out to its full scale to see if it's commercially viable, right? To see if it's going to produce a large yield, if it's going to have the features and distinguishing features that you want from it. So it's going to be shelf stable for as long as the parent is. So those are different things you're looking for when germinating spores. So yeah, spores are like a mass load of genetic material, whereas a tissue culture from an actual specimen, which you can do on almost any mushroom, would be a direct clone. So you're gonna grow a carbon copy of that from that genetic material. Any more questions? I love talking mushrooms, so yeah, I don't want to go on too many rants because we'll be here till like 10 o'clock. Espo. All right, we'll keep moving forward. So these are some of the materials I recommend. Feel free to take a picture of any of these slides or if you have questions, post this meeting. I'll be free to share information with you, but don't hesitate to take pictures so you can reflect back. But these are some of the supplies I recommend. A pressure cooker. This is an autoclave, which is basically like a heavy duty pressure cooker with some built-in safety mechanisms. This is electric, which is really good for indoor cultivation, especially living in a city or an area where you don't have access to a lot of space or outdoor space. You can use this in your home using electricity. A wide mouth mason jar, which I have here. You can retrofit these lids. There's a picture of the lid. I don't know how Cecily's name. But anyways, it is just a retro fitted lid that has a syringe injection port and a micro port filter. You can also add these 2 bags as well. They sell adhesive syringe injection ports that you can just direct inject right into the bag. Isopropyl alcohol, you use that a lot. Spray in your hands, spray in your area. It makes for quick sanitation, and it doesn't leave film behind, like as per like a bleach dilution. Unicorn bags, you all have unicorn bags. These are these bags with these micron filter patches on the front of them, which allow for your media inside to stay sterile while allowing for gas exchange through that valve. Okay. So, as I stated prior to beginning, we were going to cover the genetic lineage or how we get these commercial viable mushrooms. So it starts with observation, learning how to identify mushrooms. That's step number 1. That's what led me here. That was kind of my entry point. I was fascinated with learning how to identify mushrooms. You know, there's just hundreds of thousands of different species, varieties. It's a never-ending funnel that I don't think can ever be filled. With all of us in pursuit every season, we do shorten the gap, but it just continues to grow, especially with the taxonomy of different species and the different variation of these species. It's never ending, right, Sarah? What do you think? Yes, right? And it's fascinating. And that quest for knowledge just continues. But yeah, so this is an observation that I made alongside my buddy Chuck Alexander. This is a Hericium corluides, making that distinction due to the bracketing you can see here. Unlike Hericium erinaceus, which is going to be like the very dense lion's mane, you know, it would not have all of that fracturing within the specimen, but it produces these long teeth, and it is a variety of lion's mane. So you start with observation, identification of the tree, of the mushroom itself, taking a sample of the specimen, and then doing what we call a biopsy, a tissue transfer. So this is the cloning process. So that is an actual mushroom I found just outside of Cook Forest, and that is the culture sample I created, which can then be used to make hundreds of plates to see if it is commercially viable. I did also bring some plates for people to have. Feel free to take one after the class. These are an agar petri dish with a light malt extract, agar, very low nutrient. So it allows for cultivation of wild specimen or commercial specimen that are already available. You can go to the grocery store and take a tissue sample of a mushroom. How you do that is by making sure you have a sterile workplace and making sure you use and take small samples of sterile tissue. So the most inner flesh that has not been touched by anything. So you literally break that mushroom open, cut it open, make sure all your tools are sterile. You take a biopsy, take a tiny piece. The smaller the piece, the less chance of bringing contamination along with it to the plate. So it's something to be mindful of, right? You don't want a big piece of tissue, much smaller is much better. And I like to do this with wild specimen at least 10 times. So I'll make 10 different plates because there's likely going to be contamination or some factor of contamination along the way. So to make sure I just have a more viable specimen, what I'll do after that is I'll just take another sample of that mycelium there and transfer it to a new plate. And I could probably, from this one plate, make 100 different samples and make 100 new plates. Those plates all grow out, I have 100 more. You get it? It just quantifies at that rapid pace and volume. So you don't need much to do a lot. A little goes a long way, but I do like the genetic process, and that was a major factor for me choosing this path, and really propelled me forward. You know, I spent a lot of time in the lab, you know, and initially I didn't know what I was doing. I could not understand the text. You know, mycology is a discipline. There's a language associated with that. There's a terminology. You know, the lab binomials are very large, and when you talk to a lot of mycologists, that is their language. That is their love language. They love the lab binomials. And if you have not been to a foray, if you get a chance to make it out, it is just spectacular to watch these mycologists name these species live on site, notebooks at hand, and be 100% accurate or within reason. So it's really cool, and I really love doing it. So I'm happy to share it with you. If you have any questions about this process over like one-on-one time or a deeper dive, or any particular information about the Petri dishes, live specimen, any of that process, I will gladly share that information with you. All right, so on a commercial scale, once you have a viable specimen, this is what the genetic process entails and looks like. And you all have a micro version of this in your mushroom grow kits. So you have grain spawn. That grain spawn was made via either live tissue culture transfer directly to that grain, right, with whole grain, or by way of a liquid culture solution, which I have here. Liquid culture is basically just a nutrient-rich media. You can make this with honey water, right? I'll say a tablespoon of honey, 500 milliliters of water, you have a liquid culture, right? However, to prepare liquid culture, there are some steps. You do need either a jar, and you can make this lid, you can retrofit one, they do sell them set up already, and you need some way to sterilize it, right? So that is why the autoclave or pressure cooker is going to be kind of the nucleus of your operation, and why I brought this instrument to show you is because this essentially is all you really need if you're looking to grow commercially on a large or small scale at home. And they do sell like Presto pressure cookers, which are way more cost effective and affordable. But if you're going to invest in a piece of equipment, this can also be used for canning and preservation. So, hey, but yeah, and the way you make a liquid culture is by taking a tissue sample from this, dropping it into this media solution. It will then begin to grow. There's a magnetic stir plate in this bottle. Put that on your stir plate, it agitates the mycelium as it grows. You can then extract it using a veterinary syringe, and then you have a liquid culture syringe that you can use to inoculate your grain spawn. And I believe next we're going to talk about how you make grain spawn. Yes, grain spawn. What is grain spawn? How is it derived? What is it for? How do we use it? How do we create it? What is it, right? And essentially, it is just the carrier of genetic material. It's just nutrient rich. And these are different types of grain. I believe today in your bag, that is rye. I'm almost 100% that is rye grain. I've used all these different types of grain. Wheat is probably my favorite. I just love how firm it gets. And essentially what you're looking to do is hydrate grain. How many of you in here hydrated a grain before? Right? Rice, oatmeal, right? So there's a slow way to do it, right? Imagine soaking rice. Probably have dinner tomorrow night if you're lucky. And it might not be very good, right? But if you boil it, you kind of expedite that process. And that's what you're going to do with your grain. So fastest way is to boil it, depending on volume. You're looking at about a 30-minute boil. You will then drain the grain. You're looking for an almost al dente cook. You know, you want it to have moisture, but you don't want the kernels to burst. So it's that fine line, right? Overhydration can lead to contamination as well. So if your grain is too wet, as if you look at that grain in that bag, it looks dry, but it has been boiled. If you squeeze it, it'll probably release some moisture. So it's a perfect hydration to carry that genetic material. So yeah, hydration, looking at about 38 to 45% by total weight. So you can measure out your weight of grain and then just multiply out the hydration to know exactly how much water you need to make it in between that ratio of 38 to 45%. Sterilization is achieved when you hold temperatures above 250 degrees, which a pressure cooker and autoclave is great at. Easy to monitor that. Pasteurization happens above 200 degrees, and we'll talk about pasteurization as well. Then from there, inoculation of the grain. Once you have sterile grain, you have done the process of hydrating, sterilizing the grain in an autoclave or a pressure cooker. You would then inoculate it with either a liquid culture or a live tissue transfer. And essentially what that looks like is opening your bag or your jar of grain spawn, taking a sample from the petri dish, putting it in the jar, closing it, and shaking up the grain spawn, and allowing it to colonize, which is what we call the spawn run, how long it takes from inoculation to full colonization is your spawn run. Then from there, you can expand your grain from a generation 1 to a generation 2, generation 3 to generation 4, usually generation 1 and 2. And you can do that simply by taking fresh sterilized grain spawn and adding some of your colonized grain spawn to it, right? So taking, let's just say, with that bag you have in that grain spawn, if you took half of that and added it to a jar that had this much spawn in it, it would fully colonize within 2 weeks. And you have that much more material to work with, and then you can expand that to several jars, right? You can take a jar with, let's just say, 500 milliliters of spawn in it and make roughly 20 more jars, right? And now you have a lot of material, you're growing a lot of mushrooms, a lot of volume. As you can see, you don't need much for full colonization. And being that they're oyster mushrooms, they're least likely to suffer from contamination. Contamination is something you can't avoid. The most common is going to be trichoderma, which is a green sporulated mold. But it can be defeated by diluted hydrogen peroxide. All right, so substrate composition. I believe today your substrate is a blend of potentially sawdust and what is that? Cottonseed hulls,
Yeah.
right?
It's cottonseed.
What you're gonna do with that is to fill capacity, right? To where you can squeeze it and maybe only get like a drop of water out of it. And you're just gonna be doing like a passive pasteurization process with that, using boiling water. But things to know with substrate is volume and scale. So you can use straw or just regular sawdust from a sawmill. However, if you go to one of those places and ask for sawdust, they're going to come with the truck and be like, how many yards of it do you want? Right? So be prepared for that. It happened to me. And I was like, oh my goodness, this guy's like, you got like 8 trash bags of it. You just have all this sawdust. You don't know the moisture content in it. You don't know how clean it is. So I always recommend using just hardwood fuel pellets. We live in an area that is abundant. I believe it's a better way and use for it. So hardwood fuel pellets are what I recommend. They're compact, readily available, easy to store, right? You get a 50-pound bag, use as much as you need, as little as you need. If you don't use much of them, they store very well for a very long time. And as we did today, you can use hardwood logs as a source of substrate. So with the log inoculation, you bore the holes, you fill them with the spawn, it's going to colonize, and after about a year, it should produce some mushrooms. So what I created for you is an easy substrate recipe to follow at home. This is that substrate in a bag. We're just going to say for recipe's sake that there is 2 pounds of wood pellets, 2 pounds of supplementation, and we're doing this based on total weight, right? To get to a 10-pound substrate total. So what I would do is add 6 pounds of water to this, and I have a 10-pound total weight. From there, I would add this to my autoclave. So if you're going to be using an autoclave or pressure cooker, yes. So yeah, supplementation, what we use, what I like to use or recommend is soy hull pellets. They have a higher protein, so you can use less amount. Cottonseed hulls work really well. Beet pulp. I've also used alfalfa pellets as well. And there's wheat bran that some species like a lot of growers that grow shiitake like to supplement with wheat bran. But soy hull pellets are readily available. They're often used as cattle feed, so you can find them where you find animal feeds, things like that. So yeah, what I would do with this is I would add my dry ingredients to the bag, fill this with the amount of water I need, fold the bag filter patch in, add this to my autoclave or pressure cooker. Depending on volume, if you make, let's just say 10 of these bags, put them in the pressure cooker, you're probably looking at about an hour and a half cook time, right? So what you're looking for is the core temp to reach 250 degrees. So that takes roughly an hour and a half, depending on the vessel and the amount of volume you put inside, but just roughly. And once you have your sterile media, you will then be able to inoculate it with the species of your choice using the grain spawn. Any questions about this? The substrate? Yes.
That's what the pellets. Good grade pellets or just pellets that you use for pellet stuff?
So it can go, most are going to be food grade pellets that you will find, because like they're pressed using pressure primarily. I know someone had raised a question to me before, like what kind of oils are they using on the machine, so on and so forth. So I would say like a cooking grade would probably be best because mushrooms are bioaccumulators. So you want to be mindful of that. So if you can get organic supplements, you can get organic wheat, rye, anything you need for the grain spawn. And yeah, cooling pellets. All right, so we talked a little bit about your substrate preparation, but kind of talk about a little bit more and some of the different vessels you can use for this process and some of the other ways you can go about preparing your substrate. You can do atmospheric steam pasteurization. So in my commercial setup, I use something known as an atmospheric sterilizer. It is a Bubba's barrel. I believe it has a volume somewhere of like 165 gallons. So I roughly cook about 500 pounds of material at a time. So I do roughly 1,000 pounds of material in a day. It's about 100 bags and produce roughly 300 pounds of mushrooms, right? And we can for scale. That's something for a commercial grow. But basically the smaller version of that would be a pressure cooker or an autoclave. However, this is probably going to be the better option due to the scale of heat and being able to hold at above 250 degrees, whereas the atmospheric sterilizer is roughly at about 200 degrees, 200 to 205, and it has a false bottom that just steams and pasteurizes the substrate. So yeah, you're pasteurizing substrate, you're going to sterilize your grain spawn, right? You need that inoculum to be free of any other biocontaminants. You also have cold water lime pasteurization. You can use dehydrated lime water solution to change the alkalinity of the substrate. However, it is going to kill everything in there. So when you do go to inoculate it, the growth is going to be very slow, right? It will take almost 2 to 3 times longer than it would by way of doing it atmospherically or via a pressured vessel. Any equipment questions? I know some people are like timid around pressure cookers and that aspect. So this is like the safest version, which is recommended. You can also use a Presto like 23 quart pressure cooker. You just want to be mindful of the temperature and settings, but they are rather safe. I have not had any issues, especially when I use this. It has a pressure blow off valve. I've had everything you could imagine happen, but never like a dangerous situation where like I had to call the fire department or anything. So yeah, things have gone rather well. All right, so inoculation. Different ways you can go about inoculating. We've done a lot of open air inoculation, which is what you all are going to do with your grow kits, right? Because you probably don't have a lab set up with laminar flow hoods and a sterile workspace, but you can create that space in a closet or any room that has still air, right? No vents opening, no draft coming in, no window open, let the air settle. You can use isopropyl alcohol to basically diffuse the room and then go in and work in there as a sterile workspace, right? But you want to be mindful of where you place your hands and how you handle your material. A still air box is something you can make. I heard you earlier discussing having a Rubbermaid tote and you cut holes in it and put your arms in it. Right, perfect. That is a still air box, right? So basically a box with still air gives you the ability to work in a clean area. But it can still, even with all these things you're doing to prevent contamination, it can still happen, right? And something to be mindful of, and just don't let it discourage you, because the largest commercial players in the game still battle contamination at a much larger scale. So continue on. So open air inoculation is basically just, taking your substrate once you've sterilized it and adding the grain spawn directly to it without any of those safety parameters built in. And then from there, you're just going to let it incubate, right? You all have grow kits, so you're going to actually work this process out in real time. So you're going to then inoculate your substrate with grain spawn and allow it to colonize. With those grow kits, it could take roughly probably 2 weeks for them to fully colonize and become white, covered in mycelium, and then another week and a half for them to actually want to produce mushrooms. So once you have full colonization of your substrate, you'll introduce them into their fruiting conditions, which is where they'll begin to produce mushrooms. Fruiting conditions. All right, so mushrooms like different variables and parameters for fruiting, right? We call the fruiting process or the process where they're producing mushrooms fruiting. So high humidity, what we're trying to do is mimic nature, and where we find mushrooms growing quite often, right, in environments with high humidity, water reservoirs, sometimes in drought tolerant conditions as well. CO2 is something we measure in mushroom cultivation. Mushrooms produce CO2. If the CO2 is too high, the mushrooms will not want to properly produce caps. That is the goal of the mushroom, to produce to release the spores. And if the CO2 is too high, the mushroom will just grow in pursuit of that canopy of oxygen-rich air. Spores. Quick story I can tell you is, once I had a grow kit set up in my living room, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go on the 4 days, and I had all these mushrooms laid out. They were like all pinning, the primordial was so beautiful. Everything was going so well. I was so excited. I left, and I just knew when I came home, I was gonna open this tent, there was gonna be so many mushrooms. And it was like these deformed alien fingers sticking up in the tent, like maybe 50 to 60 bags, all look, just no caps, just these very tough, leathery stems, just in pursuit of oxygen. So I learned that lesson the hard way, that CO2 matters, and actually have a CO2 monitor that is connected to a fan that off gases CO2 for large scale cultivation. But for home cultivation, you're just fine. You have enough oxygen in your home for ample mushroom bags. But FAE is going to be your fresh air exchange, which does not happen until you introduce the mushroom to that oxygen-rich environment. A Martha tent is what you see here, basically like a rack you can create to create that humidity dome for the mushrooms, right? If you want to grow, let's just say 10, 12, 15 bags at once, different varieties, you'll want some way to start to control some of those variables. The number one most important is probably going to be humidity, CO2 in your home. but in a large scale space, if you're growing upwards of 100, 200, 300 bags, that's when those variables come into play. Of course, outdoor, which is another fruiting environment, which you'll do with your logs that you created. You'll fruit those outdoors, kind of letting nature do its thing, as nature knows best. And essentially, we're trying to reenact that. With those logs, though, once they have colonized for 10 to 12 months, so I would say like next spring, they should be rather well colonized. You can then force fruit them by soaking them in a water reservoir. Let me see here, did I miss anything? So yeah, shaded area for your logs. You have a marker tent, you have a grow tent, which you can modify. Low lumen LED lights. Mushrooms are semi-photosynthetic. Not in the sense of by way of how mushrooms, how plants photosynthesize for their carbohydrates in daily activity, but are photosensitive. So light does play a role in mushroom production, right? We have, like, for instance, if I have mushrooms growing on different shelves, the mushrooms that are more near the light are way more ahead as far as producing like large yields than the ones on the lower shelf. So light can have an effect. I know there are some different cultivators working with different types of light and spectrums of light to see how the mushrooms grow, and if you can potentially enhance any of the compounds within the mushrooms by way of light. So it is kind of a new venture we're seeing in the world of mushroom cultivation that's currently transpiring. So it's really cool. All right, so here is more of a deeper dive that is species specific to show you some of the controls and variables we are monitoring per species. So you can see they have their own background and profile they like, and these are some of the conditions we try to meet. So supplementation, 20% total volume on a commercial scale. So I'm using 10 pounds of material, water included. And so when I inoculate a bag, essentially it starts out as this brown material. Once it's fully colonized, it becomes white. You can see little small spots here all over that block. Those are like little pins or primordia trying to form. However, there's no oxygen in that environment. So the mushroom's going to grow where we let the oxygen in. So there is a slit on the top of that bag, which is why the fruit body is growing from that specific area. Question? Oh, sorry. CO2 levels in the earlier stages, you need a very high CO2 environment, which is created in these bags. So you have your bags that you're going to zip tie, and once they're sealed, that area above the material is going to be your plenum, which is where the CO2 is going to build up. And then these micron filter patch allow for gas exchange to happen. So you want to seal your bags above the filter patch. So because there might not be a ton of volume in the bag, so a lot of people probably try to squeeze out as much air as possible, but you want to leave room for that gas exchange to happen. Now, things drastically change once you introduce them to fruiting conditions. So the fruiting period, so your spawn run, or the amount of time it takes for it to fully colonize that substrate, is going to be anywhere from 10 to 13 days, depending on the warmth of the environment you place it. Your fruiting conditions, however, roughly around that same window, 9 to 13 days from the time you introduce it to that oxygen-rich environment or make that incision on your bag. Humidity, you can control that by misting wherever you make that incision on the bag. And the most ideal fruiting temperatures I've encountered are going to be between 60 and 80 degrees on the high end. So I've grown mushrooms at temperatures as low as about 46 degrees. So there's this property that I use that it's a cave, essentially. It's a spring-fed cave that's underground that I use to grow. And in the winter months, the water continues to flow, but the temperature drops to about just around, like, I've never really seen it hit like the 30s, maybe just like the upper 30s. But I've tried to grow mushrooms down there during the winter months and they stall. But I just don't, I've just left them down there January, February, March, April, and in those warmer months, they start to produce. So I have some expertise as far as like some of those environmental factors in reference to growing, whether it's indoor, outdoor, passively, just using nature in a sense. All right, the lion's mane mushroom, Hericium arenaceae, is very similar profile with the spawn rate CO2 levels. Again, that plenum, that upper area is going to be controlled by that oxygen exchange valve you have on the bag. Similar profile in reference to the fruiting CO2 levels it likes. A little bit more CO2 than the oyster mushrooms. They really like oxygen-rich environments. They really need it to produce those large bracketed clusters, whereas the lion's mane is growing in this dense palm and likes a very CO2-rich environment to start. Humidity, it fluctuates. In a controlled environment, we have all these different monitors and controls. So, you know, I'll take the humidity up to 90% and let it differential back down to 80%. It just does that on and off all day. So it's like almost like simulating rain. However, you don't have the mushroom just saturated in moisture all day. So similar process, you'll definitely want to monitor your oyster mushrooms because they are drought sensitive. So as they start to dry, you can still use them, but if they start to brown and dry, I would recommend picking them at that point and either using them or drying them. Fruiting temperature for lion's mane, they like it a bit cooler. I've found them in the wild in this similar temperature range. I've also found them in the summer months and in the early fall. So when the overnight lows are in the mid 40s. And then shiitake. So growing shiitakes on blocks, if you're going to use the similar indoor supplementation style method, you would use wheat bran versus soy hull pellets or any of those supplements due to the protein percentage in wheat bran. The spawn run is much longer. So guys that grow shiitakes typically have a lot of space because they have to sit and colonize for 9 to 12 weeks, right? So you have almost 2 to 3 months of time that this thing sits on a shelf, and as it sits, the colonization looks really cool. It turns white and then it does this thing called browning and it gets very bumpy over this course. Another mushroom that has a long spawn run like this is going to be Maitake Grifola frondosa. Typically, you have 6 to 8 weeks that it has to sit on the shelf and colonize before it's ready to be introduced into the fruiting conditions. Shiitake like very high CO2 in the commercial cultivation level. Humidity high, very similar range for fruiting conditions. Outdoors with your logs, I've seen shiitake grow in temperatures, you know, in the mid 40s. You know, if we get a cold spring rain, I've seen logs begin to fruit. However, if they encounter frost, they will stall and could potentially drop off or dry on the log. So it's something to be mindful of. I believe that's going to be almost just about it. You follow all those steps and ooh la la, back to the beautiful mushrooms. Yes.
You mentioned soaking the log. My log left from last year did not fruit.
Okay.
And I think it might have been too dry.
Okay.
So can you think it was an apple wood? I don't know.
Yeah, they do dry out a little bit faster.
Okay. So could I soak it?
Yeah, try it.
How would I do that?
I would say soak it if you have like a trough or a creek or access to any kind of waterway like that. 24 hours, just give it a bath, let it soak, and then put it back out.
Thanks.
Here is another simple bucket technique I like to recommend. Another very simple, user-friendly way you can grow mushrooms. And again, if you don't have a lot of the starting materials like grain spawn, it is commercially available. You can reach out to me directly. I'll give you my information, link to my website and restaurant, so you can contact me directly if you have any questions about any of the materials, whether it's the genetic material, the liquid cultures, any of the commercial equipment. If you're interested in leveling up into that realm, I'll gladly point you in the right direction. And that's it. So Espo Wilcox, I invite all of you to our restaurant, which is located on Route 66 in Lucinda, Pennsylvania, near Cook Forest. So if you plan on attending the Gary Lane Hall Foray, we are en route. Can't miss it. Right? We do like a Neapolitan style pizza. That pizza actually has morels on it, which is pretty cool. And then we have a Cantonese wok, so we do a lot of Asian dishes. We make all the sauces in house. We do a lot of stuff with wild mushrooms, like buffalo chicken of the woods pizza, which is a real popular dish. Big shout out to Mike because I believe it's his recipe. Him, Barbara, it's a shared recipe. We all share a common identity. But yeah, the buffalo chicken of the woods pizza, phenomenal. Chanterelle focaccia bread. Oh man, we do all kinds of stuff. Oh, prime rib. French fry we did with a chef. We used dry laid pork, so chicken of the woods, kind of let it sit, dry out, got really ripe, almost like smell like wine, like fermented a bit, and it added this nice, beautiful, bright orange color to the French fries that were finished with a horseradish dipping sauce. Oh my god, just so good. Yeah, using wild mushrooms in ways, using cultivated mushrooms in different ways. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. My website is pamushroom.com. You can also find us on social media, PA Mushroom Company, and that's my number and email. So feel free to reach out with any questions you may have moving forward, whether you're a first timer, have never cultivated a mushroom, or you're looking to grow hundreds of pounds of mushrooms. I'd love to chat with you and give you some information. I also have books up here and some free petri dishes. So here is a way for you to start. You can use these to make your first tissue transfer. So if you find a wild mushroom out there, you can take a tissue and do genetic preservation and potentially send in a piece of this tissue to get have it DNA sequence. So it's another way you can save your genetics and just play around with mycology on a smaller level if you don't have a full setup and all of the tools and apparatuses to start. So these are free to take. And that's all I have for you today. So thank you for showing up. Appreciate chatting with you.